The ship named Horizon moved slowly at the edge of charted space. It was a human vessel built for long journeys and deep surveys. Its hull carried the marks of many voyages, and its crew knew the sound of every engine hum. Commander Holly stood at the main viewing window and watched the stars drift past like quiet fires in the dark. For many days, the journey had been calm. The crew checked charts and scanned space for signs of planets or stations. They had passed empty rock worlds and frozen moons. Most days felt the same until the moment the signal came dot. It began as a faint pattern in the static. At first, it seemed like nothing more than background noise. The ship's scanner officer, a young man named Rin, almost ignored it. But then he noticed the rhythm. The signal came in short and long bursts, repeating again and again. Rin adjusted the settings, and the sound became clear enough to measure. It was not a random wave. It was a message. Holla walked over to Rin's station and leaned down to listen. The pattern repeated every 20 seconds without change. Rin explained that it was coming from a barren moon 3 systems ahead. The moon had no known settlements. The charts marked it as lifeless and unimportant. Yet this signal kept coming, as if it had been waiting for someone to hear it. Holly called the rest of the bridge crew to attention. They studied the data and checked the moon's old survey records. No human had landed there in over a century. Some of the crew suggested ignoring the signal since the mission was to chart star lanes, not chase unknown beacons. But Holla felt the pull of curiosity. Humanity had learned much from the old ruins found in deep space. Some had given new technology. Others had taught lessons about the rise and fall of civilizations. Holly believed this might be such a discovery. The decision was made. The Horizon changed course toward the barren moon. The journey would take 2 days. In that time, the signal never stopped. It was steady, as if it knew they were coming. When the moon came into sight, the crew gathered at the windows. The surface was pale gray and covered in craters. A thin mist swirled over the valleys, even though the moon had almost no atmosphere. The signal grew stronger as they entered orbit. Mara, the ship's engineer, traced the source to a deep canyon on the far side of the moon. Holly ordered a landing team to prepare. Mara would join, along with Rin and 2 security officers named Darrow and Lin. The landing craft separated from the Horizon and dropped through the thin haze toward the canyon. Floor dot as they descended. The canyon walls rose high on both sides. They were marked with deep grooves, as if cut by enormous tools long ago. At the base of the canyon, the land flattened into a stretch of dark stone. The signal source was only a few hundred meters away. The team stepped out of the craft. The air was cold and still. Every step sent a small cloud of dust floating away. Mara carried a scanner, Rim carried a signal reader, and Darrow and Lin kept their hands near their weapons, though Holly had ordered that they should only fire if there was clear danger. They moved toward a rise in the stone ground. As they reached the top, they saw the ruins. The shapes of walls and pillars stood in a wide circle. Some had fallen, others still stood straight, as if untouched by time. The markings on the stone were not like any known language. They were sharp, lines and curves that seemed to bend when looked at for too long. The signal grew loud enough to make Rin's reader vibrate. It came from the center of the ruin where a single chamber stood. The chamber was a block of black stone with a narrow door sealed shut. The door had no visible handle or lock, but faint light pulsed from its edges. Mara knelt to study the base of the door. The light shifted in color, moving from pale blue to silver and back again. She said it was some kind of energy seal. She had never seen the exact type before. It might be ancient, or might be far beyond human design. While she worked, Lin noticed something at the edge of the ruins. A shadow moved across the stone, but there was no sun overhead to cast it. It slipped between the pillars and was gone before anyone could get a clear look. Lynn stepped forward and called softly, but no answer came. Darrow joined her, and together they searched the area. The ground was hard, but in the dust near the fallen stones they found tracks. They were longer than a human foot and had more than 5 toes. The crew exchanged looks. The moon was supposed to be empty. Hale's voice came through the comlink. From the horizon, he asked for a status report. Mara explained they had found the source of the signal, and it was sealed behind a strange door. Hale told them to proceed with caution and report any live signs. The team set up a small camp near the chamber to study it. Hours passed as Mara tried to trace the energy patterns. She said the door might open if the right sequence was given, but forcing it might destroy whatever was inside Dodd as the light on the canyon walls began to fade. Rin adjusted the signal reader. The pattern of the signal changed slightly. It no longer repeated at the same rate. Now it rose and fell like a voice, speaking in slow, measured tones. Before anyone could speak, the shadow returned. This time, it came closer. Between 2 pillars, they saw the outline of a figure. It was tall, its shape wavering as if it were made of light and smoke. The air around it shimmered. No face could be seen, only the suggestion of eyes glowing pale in the dim light. The figure stopped short. Distance from the team. No one moved. The signal reader in Rin's hands gave a sharp pulse. The sound was like a single note, held for a long breath. The figure raised one hand and the note stopped. Mara whispered that she thought it was the source of the signal. The figure did not advance, but its presence filled the air with a strange weight. The ruins felt alive now, as if they had been sleeping, and had just awakened. Commander Hale's voice came again through the comm. He asked what they were seeing. Rin answered quietly that they might have found something alive on the moon after all. Something that was guarding the chamber. The figure turned slightly toward the sealed door, then back to the humans. Without speaking in words, it seemed to give a message that was clear in feeling. Stay away. The air in the canyon was cold and still. The figure did not move. It stood as if it had been carved from the light itself. The glow in its eyes seemed to watch every breath the humans took. No one spoke for a long moment. Even the hum of the landing craft in the distance fell quiet under its gaze. Mara kept her scanner low and steady. The screen showed no reading that matched any living thing. It was as if the figure did not exist, and yet it was right there. Darrow and Lynn kept their weapons at their sides, but their hands tightened on the grips. The figure slowly stepped back. Its movement was smooth, without sound. When it reached the shadow of a broken wall, it faded until only the glow of its eyes remained. Then even that glow vanished. Rin let out a slow breath and checked the signal reader. The steady note that had filled the air before was gone. In its place, the original repeating pattern returned. Hale's voice came again from the horizon. He told them to be careful and to continue studying the site. Mara said the energy seal on the chamber was still active. She could not open it without knowing how it was made. Forcing it could trigger traps or destroy what was inside. They decided to search the ruins more carefully. The crew spread out across the stone ground. Between the fallen pillars and half-buried walls, they found strange carvings. Some looked like maps of star clusters. Others showed shapes that might have been creatures, though none matched known life forms. Ling called the others to a corner of the site where the ground dipped into a shallow pit. At the bottom were more tracks like the one she had seen earlier. The prints crossed over each other as if many steps had been taken in the same place. Some were fresh while others looked older, covered by thin layers of dust. It was clear the figure was not the only one here. Something had been moving through the ruins for a long time. Night came quickly on the moon. The thin atmosphere made the sky black and sharp with stars. The crew lit portable lamps around the camp. The pale beams cast long shadows over the walls. They took turns watching the ruins while Mara continued her work on the chamber door. She placed small sensors along the edge to read the flow of energy. The readings shifted as if the door's power source was alive, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. During Rin's watch, a sound came from the far side of the site. It was faint, like stone scraping against stone. He moved his lamp toward it, but saw nothing. He called to Lin, who was resting near the landing craft. Together they walked along the outer wall. The sound came again, a slow dragging noise followed by a low hum. When they turned a corner, they froze. In the glow of the lamp, they saw shapes moving beyond the wall. They were not solid like the first figure, but thin and shifting, as if made of smoke. They slid over the ground without touching it. Their forms bent and twisted like ribbons in the wind. Rin and Lin backed away and called for Darrow. By the time he arrived, the shapes had faded into the darkness. They searched the area but found nothing except a strange warmth in the stone. Where the shapes had passed, Mara heard their report and looked troubled. She said the energy patterns at the chamber door had also changed at that moment. It was as if the presence of those shapes had touched the seal in some way. Hale ordered them to set up motion sensors around the site. The crew placed them along the walls and between the pillars. The sensors gave small pulses of light every few seconds. If anything moved within their range, the light would change to red. Hours passed in uneasy silence. The crew sat near the lamps, speaking little. The shadows seemed to shift even when there was no wind. The stone ground felt warmer than it should in the cold night dot. Then, without warning, one of the motion sensors flashed red. It was near the pit where they had seen the fresh tracks. Darrow ran to check, but found nothing there. The sensor light returned to normal. A second later, 2 more sensors turned red on the opposite side of the ruins. This time, they caught a glimpse of movement, a quick flicker between the pillars. It was too fast to follow. The air grew heavy. The crew could feel something around them, though they could not see it clearly. Mara looked at the door and saw the glow along its edge growing brighter. The pulsing was faster now. Suddenly, the figure from before stepped out of the shadows near the chamber. It raised one hand and the sensors went dark. The lamps flickered and dimmed. The crew stood still, their eyes fixed on the glowing form. The figure moved toward them slowly. The glow of its eyes was steady. It stopped only a few steps away from Mara. Though it had no mouth, they felt as if it was speaking directly into their thoughts. The meaning was simple and strong. "Do not open the chamber." Mara's voice shook as she asked what was inside. The figure did not answer. Instead, it turned and pointed toward the stars above the canyon. For a moment, the crew thought they saw shapes moving in the sky, far away but vast, like shadows of ships or creatures too large to imagine. When they looked back, the figure was gone. The lamps brightened again and the sensors lit green. The ruins were silent once more. The crew gathered at the chamber door. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Rin said they should leave, but Hale's voice came through the comm telling them to hold their position until morning. He wanted every detail before deciding what to do next. Mara returned to her scanner, but her hands were slower now. She could not shake the image of the vast moving shapes in the sky. If the figure was guarding the treasure, then whatever was in that chamber was not meant for just anyone to take. The crew took turns resting, but sleep came only in short moments. Each time someone closed their eyes, they felt as if something was standing just beyond the edge of the light, watching and waiting. When the first pale light of the moon's day returned, the signal changed again. This time, it was not a pattern, but a slow rising tone, clear and unbroken. Mara looked at the others and said the seal on the chamber was reacting to something. They were no longer alone in the ruins. The pale light of the new day fell across the ruins. Long shadows stretched over the cracked stone, and the air felt colder than before. The crew gathered near the chamber. No one had slept well. Each had felt the strange sense of being watched. Through the night, Mara checked her scanner again. The energy seal on the door was still active, but its pulse had quickened. It reminded her of a heartbeat that was no longer calm. The signal in Rin's reader had also changed. The slow tone from the night was now mixed with short bursts like the start of a new message. Dara walked the perimeter to check the motion sensors. He found no damage, but noticed the dust near the pit had fresh tracks again. Some were human-sized. Others were the same strange long shapes with more than 5 toes. They overlapped as if different beings had been moving there together. Hale's voice came from the horizon. He told the team to hold position until he sent a second landing party. Mara began to reply but stopped when she noticed Rin staring at the far wall of the ruins. A shimmer was forming in the air above the stone. It was like heat rising from metal, but the temperature was still cold. The shimmer grew until it took the shape of the tall figure they had seen before. The glow of its eyes was steady, and its form seemed clearer now. The lines of its body shifted like flowing water, yet held the shape of shoulders and arms. The figure stepped forward. Every footfall was silent, yet each movement felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of the whole canyon. The crew instinctively stepped back but did not raise their weapons. When the figure stopped, the air around them seemed to thicken. Words did not come from it, yet the crew heard meaning inside their thoughts. The sense was strong and clear. They had reached a line they should not cross. The Guardian's will was to keep the chamber closed. Mara swallowed and asked aloud why the chamber was sealed. There was no answer in words. Instead, the figure raised its hand. Light spread from its palm and formed an image in the air. The crew saw visions of the canyon long ago. Towers stood where now there were ruins. Beings of light and shadow walked between them. In the center stood the black stone chamber. Around it, groups of figures placed crystals into the ground. The crystals glowed, sending energy into the chamber door. The vision shifted. Strange dark shapes appeared in the sky. They were vast, and their movements bent the air around them. The light beings fought them, but the sky grew darker and the ground trembled. The last image showed the chamber door sealing itself while the Guardian stood before it. Then the vision ended. The crew understood the meaning. The treasure inside had been locked away to keep it safe from something powerful and dangerous. The Guardian had been here since that time, waiting, watching. The figure turned and looked at each of them in silence. Then it stepped aside from the chamber door. The seal glowed brighter, and the ground beneath their feet rumbled softly. 3 large stones rose from the dust between the Guardian and the crew. Each stone was carved with lines that twisted like star paths. At first they looked random, but Mara's eyes widened as she studied them. They were navigation puzzles. Each one represented a route through space, but the paths were broken, and only one correct route could connect the starting point to the end. The meaning pressed into their minds again. If they wanted to see what was in the chamber, they would have to prove they were worthy. Rin stepped forward first. He examined the leftmost stone. His training as a navigator helped him follow the lines. He traced them with his finger, testing different paths in his mind. The lines bent in strange ways, curving back on themselves. After long minutes, he found the correct route and pressed his hand to it. The stone lit with a soft golden glow. The Guardian turned its gaze to the second stone. Mara approached it, her scanner in hand. This puzzle was more complex. Some of the lines crossed in ways that could not exist in real space. She realized they were folded paths, routes through places where space bent. It took her longer to find the right answer, but when she pressed the correct point, the stone also lit with gold. Only one puzzle remained. Darrow stepped forward. Navigation was not his skill, but he had studied old star maps in his spare time. The lines on the third Stone were faint and harder to follow. He made 2 wrong choices before finding the right one. The glow was weaker than the others, but still it shone. When the 3rd stone lit, the guardian raised both hands. The ground trembled again, and the seal on the chamber door flared with bright silver light. The sound of the signal in Rin's reader rose to a sharp tone that almost hurt to hear. Then it stopped. The guardian lowered its hands and stepped aside fully from the door. The message in their minds was calm now. They had passed the test. Mara moved to the chamber door and touched its surface. The stone felt warm, almost alive. The silver light along its edges faded, leaving a thin line of shadow. Slowly, without a sound, the door began to open. Cold air spilled out from the darkness inside. The crew peered into the chamber, but could see only a faint blue glow deep within. They stepped forward together, but the guardian lifted one hand. The meaning that filled their minds was different this time. They could look inside, but they must not take what was within unless they understood its purpose. Mara nodded, and they crossed the threshold. The inside of the chamber was smooth and round. In the center on a pedestal stood a crystal sphere the size of a human head. It pulsed with blue light, and within its depths were moving points of gold. As they looked closer, they realized the points were not random. They formed patterns like constellations. The sphere was a map, but not of known space. These were worlds uncharted by human records. Rin felt his breath catch. The map was vast, filled with countless star systems. Some glowed brighter than others, as if rich in something important. Mara reached toward the sphere, but stopped when she felt a vibration in the air. Behind them, the guardian stood silent in the doorway. The weight of its gaze was heavy. They knew this was more than a map. This was a gift or a danger, depending on the hands that held it. The chamber felt alive with expectation. The choice of what to do next rested entirely with them. The glow of the crystal sphere lit the inside of the chamber in soft blue light. Shadows moved gently along the walls as the light shifted, as if the sphere itself was breathing. Mara, Rin, Darrow, and Lin stood in silence. Each one felt the weight of what they were looking at. Rin stepped closer and studied the tiny golden points within the sphere. They were not random stars. They were grouped in ways that matched planetary systems. Some clusters shone brighter, and he guessed those worlds were richer in resources or life. He could not stop thinking about what these locations would mean for humans. Whole planets never touched by any other race could be explored, studied, and maybe even settled. Mara kept her scanner pointed at the sphere. The readings were strange. The object was not only a map, but also a source of great energy. She said softly that it might be able to power a ship for centuries or act as a beacon to guide travel between the marked worlds. Darrow was silent, his eyes moving from the sphere to the guardian standing at the door. He had the strong feeling that the being was not only watching them, but also weighing their thoughts. Lin felt the same. The presence of the guardian was like a constant reminder that this was no ordinary find. The guardian raised one arm, and the crew felt meaning fill their minds again. This time the images came slowly, giving them time to see. They saw human ships arriving at worlds marked on the map. In one path of vision, those ships brought scientists, healers, and explorers. They studied the worlds with care, learned from them, and left without harm. In the other path of vision, they saw warships, mining drills, and fire. Forests burned, oceans turned black, and life was taken away. When the vision faded, the guardian stepped aside from the doorway. Its meaning was clear. The choice was theirs, Don. Mara looked at the others. She said the map could change the future of humanity. But she also warned that once others knew about it, there would be no way to control what happened next. Rin's mind raced. He thought of the many human colonies in deep space that struggled for resources. This could save them. But he also knew greed could move faster than wisdom. Darrow crossed his arms. He suggested they could keep the sphere hidden until they were sure it was safe to share. Lynn agreed, but added that hiding something this big would not be easy. Someone would notice the data they had collected and start asking questions. Their comms crackled. Hale's voice came from the horizon above. He asked for a report. Mara hesitated before answering. She told him only that they had found something of great value and were still assessing it. Hale's reply was short. He was sending the second landing party now. Rin glanced at the Guardian. He felt as if the being already knew this news. The glow of its eyes dimmed slightly, as if in thought. Then it moved forward into the chamber. The air grew heavy, and a new vision came. They saw ships approaching the moon, ships that were not human. The designs were sharp and dark, with long wings like blades. Mara recognized them from old reports of a species that avoided contact with humans. These ships moved fast, breaking through space with bursts of light. The vision shifted again, showing the canyon from above. The Guardian stood alone against a storm of these ships. Energy weapons struck the ruins, but the Guardian held a shield of light. The chamber remained closed. The meaning was sharp. Others could come. Others had tried before. The crew exchanged tense looks. Hale's voice came again, saying the second team was almost ready to land. Mara quickly explained the situation and urged him to delay. But before Hale could respond, a faint alarm began to sound from Rin's reader. The device had picked up a small signal on the edge of the moon's range. It was not from the horizon. They moved outside the chamber into the ruins. The morning light touched the canyon walls, but the air felt colder now. Above, a small glint in the sky marked something descending. It was too far to see clearly, but it was not human in shape. The Guardian stepped past them and stood in the open space before the chamber. The glow around its form brightened until it looked like a pillar of silver flame. Mara realized that this was another test. The Guardian had shown them the treasure, and now they would have to prove what they would do with it. When danger came, Darrow checked his weapon. Lynn readied her gear. Rin kept scanning the sky. The signal was getting stronger. Whatever was coming was moving quickly. Hale's voice was sharp over the comm. He said the horizon had also detected the incoming ship. He was moving the second landing party into defensive positions and keeping the main ship ready to lift off if needed. The crew looked at the Guardian, but it gave no further vision or instruction. It simply stood, facing the sky, its body bright with energy. Minutes later, the incoming craft broke through the thin clouds above the canyon. It was black with silver edges, shaped like a long arrow. No markings showed its origin. It slowed. As it approached, gliding down toward the canyon floor, the crew waited, unsure if they should hide or stand with the Guardian. Mara chose the latter, stepping forward to stand near its side. One by one, the others joined her. The craft landed on the far side of the ruins, kicking up dust that swirled around the ancient stones. A ramp extended from its side, and 3 figures stepped out. They were tall and thin, with armor that caught the light like polished stone. Their faces were hidden behind smooth masks, and they carried long spears that hummed faintly. The strangers walked slowly toward the chamber. They did not look at the humans at first. Their eyes, or whatever was behind the masks, seemed fixed only on the sphere inside. When they reached the center of the ruins, one of them spoke in a low, calm voice. The words were unknown, but the meaning came through a translator on Mara's belt. They claimed the sphere was theirs by right, taken from them long ago, and they had come to reclaim it. Before Mara could respond, the Guardian stepped between the strangers and the chamber door. The glow from its body flared brighter, and the air rippled with silent force. The strangers stopped, gripping their spears. The canyon grew silent. and everyone waited to see who would make the first move. The three strangers stood still, their dark armor glinting under the pale light. The humming of their spears filled the silence like a faint warning. The Guardian's glow lit the stone ground around its feet. The two sides faced each other without moving. Mara, Rin, Darrow, and Lin stood a few steps behind the Guardian. They could feel the tension in the air, like the weight of an oncoming storm. The strangers' masks showed no expression, but their body language spoke of sharp focus. One of the strangers stepped forward. The voice from behind the mask was calm but carried strength. Through Mara's translator came the meaning. The sphere was a creation of their ancestors. It had been lost in a great war, long before humans had reached the stars. The Guardian was not its maker, only its keeper, and now the rightful owners had returned. The Guardian gave no answer in words. Instead, a vision filled the minds of the humans. They saw a time long ago when the sky over this moon was filled with light and fire. Ships clashed above, and the surface shook with the force of their weapons. The strangers' ancestors fought among themselves for control of the sphere. The battle grew so fierce that the worlds marked on the map were burned or emptied. To save what remained, the Guardian had sealed the sphere away, choosing to protect it until a race came who could prove wisdom beyond greed. When the vision faded, the strangers shifted uneasily. They seemed to know the truth of what had been shown, but did not speak of it. Rin looked at Mara and whispered that this was the moment they would be tested. The Guardian wanted to see not only if they could solve puzzles, but also if they could make the right choice when faced with danger and temptation. Darrow stepped forward and spoke in a steady voice. He said the sphere should not be given to any one people unless they could promise to protect the worlds it showed. His words were clear, but the strangers gave no sign they had heard. The one in front lowered its spear slightly and spoke again. The translated words were sharper now. They said the humans had no claim, and that refusal to hand over the sphere would bring consequences. The Guardian's glow grew brighter, and a low sound like distant thunder rolled through the ruins. The stone under their feet trembled. The strangers tightened their grip on their spears, but did not attack. Mara took a deep breath. She stepped to the Guardian's side and spoke directly to the strangers. She told them that humans had found the sphere after passing the Guardian's test. They had been shown the harm it could bring if placed in the wrong hands. They would not give it away until they were sure the worlds on the map would remain unharmed. The strangers were silent for a moment. Then the one in front tilted its head slightly, as if in thought. In a slower voice, they offered a different proposal. They would share the sphere with humans, each taking a copy of the map. In return, the humans would help them restore some of the ruined world's dot. It sounded like peace, but Mara knew it would not be that simple. Copies could still be used for conquest. She looked at Rin, Darrow, and Lin. They all gave small, wordless signs of agreement. She turned back and said no. Not until they knew for certain that the worlds would be safe. The silence deepened. Dust drifted in the air between them. Then, without warning, the strangers moved forward, their spears humming louder. The Guardian stepped ahead of Mara, its entire body blazing with silver light. The force of its presence pushed the strangers back several steps. For a moment, no one moved. Then the lead stranger raised a hand, and the others stopped. The humming of the spears quieted. Slowly they backed away toward their craft. The lead one spoke once more through the translator. They would not fight here, but they would return. The sphere was theirs, and they would not forget this meeting. The three climbed the ramp of their ship, and moments later the black craft rose into the sky. Its shadow crossed over the ruins before vanishing into the pale clouds. When the sound of the engines faded, the canyon was quiet again. The Guardian's glow softened, though it still stood tall before the chamber. The message That filled the crew's minds was slower now, almost gentle. They had chosen to protect rather than take the easy path. The Guardian respected that Mara looked at the sphere on its pedestal. The blue light within it pulsed steadily. It felt strange to be so close to something so powerful and not claim it for themselves. But she knew the choice had been right. Hal's voice came from the horizon. He had seen the other ship depart and asked for a full report. Mara explained what had happened. Holly was silent for a while. Then he told them to hold position until he arrived in person. As they waited, Rin ran more scans of the sphere. He found that the golden points within it were not just static locations. Some shifted slightly, as if marking worlds that moved along a hidden path. Mara realized this meant the map was alive. It updated itself. It was more than a treasure. It was a living record of uncharted space. Lin kept watch at the edge of the ruins. The sky above was quiet now, but she could not shake the feeling that the strangers would indeed come back. When they did, the humans might not be the only ones. Here to meet them, Dara walked around the site, checking for more signs of movement. He found fresh tracks again near the pit. This time, they were not the long, many-toed prints. They were human-sized but lighter, as if made by someone carrying almost no weight. Whoever or whatever made them had been there while the standoff happened. When Hallie finally landed with the second team, the Guardian did not block them. It simply stepped back and stood to the side of the chamber. Hallie listened to the full account, his face unreadable. When Mara finished, he walked up to the sphere and studied it without touching it. He turned to the crew and said this was more than a discovery. It was a responsibility. They would not remove the sphere from the chamber yet. Instead, they would study it here under the watch of the Guardian. If humans could prove over time that they would use it wisely, then perhaps they would earn the right to take it. The Guardian's eyes glowed faintly, as if in agreement. The crew knew the choice had been made for now, but the true test was still ahead. Somewhere beyond the stars, the strangers were already planning their return. The pale light of the moon's day spread slowly over the canyon. The ruins were still, but the crew felt no peace. Even after the strangers' ship had gone, the memory of their words stayed heavy in the air. They had promised to return, and no one doubted they would. Commander Holly walked among the fallen pillars, his eyes scanning the broken stone. He spoke little, only asking short questions about the map and the events before his arrival. Mara explained again what they had seen, the puzzles, the visions, and the warning from the Guardian. Holly stopped in front of the chamber. The Guardian stood there as before, its glow calm now, almost like a soft lantern in the dark. It did not block the way, nor did it speak in visions. It simply watched. Holly stared at it for a long time before turning to the crew. He said they had two choices. The first was to leave the sphere in the chamber and hope the Guardian could protect it alone. The second was to take the sphere to the horizon and hide it in human space, far from the reach of the strangers. Rin was quick to speak. He said moving the sphere could bring danger to every human colony. If the strangers followed them, the fight would spread beyond this moon. Mara agreed. She added that the Guardian had kept the sphere safe for centuries. It had held off enemies before and could do so again. Daro, however, argued that the strangers had found the moon once and would find it again. Sooner or later, they might come in greater numbers. Lin nodded at his words, saying the Guardian might not be able to hold forever. Holly listened without interrupting. Then he told them the choice was not just about safety. It was about what kind of people humans wanted to be. Were they the kind who took something powerful simply because they could, or the kind who respected the trust of those who gave them tests to prove their worth? No one answered right away. The wind moved lightly through the canyon, carrying the sound of dust shifting between the stones. Suddenly, Rin's scanner began to beep softly. He frowned and adjusted it. A faint signal was approaching from far, beyond the moon's orbit. It was small, almost hidden, but moving fast. Hawley ordered the Horizon to check their long-range scans. A moment later, the voice from the ship confirmed it. Something was coming. The speed of the signal told them it could not be the stranger's large craft. This was smaller, perhaps a scout. The question was whose scout it was. The Guardian turned its head slightly toward the sky. For the first time since Hale's arrival, a vision came. The humans saw the black shape of the stranger ship, but this time it was joined by two others. Smaller craft moved ahead of them, slipping through space like hunting animals. The meaning was clear. The strangers were not far, and they were sending scouts ahead. Hawley looked at the crew and said the choice had to be made now. They could take the sphere aboard the Horizon and try to flee before the strangers arrived, or they could stay and defend the chamber with the Guardian. Mara walked to the sphere. She looked into its blue light and saw the tiny golden points shifting. Inside, the worlds on the map seemed to move in slow patterns, as if alive. She thought of the vision the Guardian had shown. Ships coming in peace, ships coming in war. She knew the sphere was more than a prize. It was a measure of what humans could become. She stepped back and said they should not take it. She believed the Guardian had chosen them to stand here for a reason. If they left, they would be just another group passing the burden to someone else. Rin agreed. He said the puzzles and visions were not simply to see if they were clever. They were to see if they would stay when the danger came. Darrow hesitated, then nodded slowly. Even Lynn, who'd spoken of moving it earlier, lowered her eyes and said she would stay. Hawley looked at each of them, then turned to the Guardian. He spoke clearly. The humans would stand with it and defend the sphere. The Guardian's glow brightened, and a low hum filled the air. The vision that came next showed the canyon surrounded by light, not just the Guardians, but also beams from human ships above. The meaning was hope, but also warning. If they stood together, they could hold. The crew began preparing the site. Darrow and Lynn set up defensive positions using the old stone walls as cover. Rin placed motion sensors farther out in the canyon. Mara worked with the Horizon to link their ship systems to the sensors, so they would have early warning when anything entered the area. As the work went on, the signal of the incoming scout grew stronger. Hawley kept one eye on the sky, speaking quietly with the Horizon's pilot. They needed to be ready to move the ship quickly if the scouts tried to strike from orbit. By the time the pale light of the moon's day began to fade, the preparations were nearly complete. The Guardian remained near the chamber door, its glow steady. It seemed almost like part of the stone itself, unmoving and certain. Then, as the first shadows of night touched the canyon floor, Rin's sensors lit red. Something had entered the canyon. The crew moved to their positions. From the far side, a small craft appeared, black and narrow. It slid between the canyon walls with no sound. Its shape matched the vision the Guardian had shown, a scout. The craft stopped in the open, space before the ruins. The ramp lowered slowly, and a single figure stepped out. Its armor was the same dark metal as the strangers before, but lighter. It carried no spear, only a small device in one hand. It walked forward, stopping just outside the ruins. Through the translator came its words. It said it had been sent to speak before the larger ships arrived. If the humans gave the sphere willingly, no one would be harmed. Hawley answered firmly. The sphere would not be given. The figure stood still for a long moment, then raised the device in its hand. A bright signal burst from it, streaking into the sky. Mara's heart sank. The scout had just called the others. The figure turned and walked back to its craft. The ramp closed, and the small ship lifted into the air, disappearing into the night above. The Guardian's glow grew brighter than ever before. The hum in the air became a steady pulse. The humans knew what it meant. The strangers were on their way, and soon the real battle for the treasure would begin. Night settled over the canyon. The sky above was filled with pale stars, but none of the crew looked up. All eyes were on the black space beyond the horizon where the strangers' ships would soon appear. The air was still, but there was a strange weight to it, as if the moon itself was holding its breath. The horizon hovered above the canyon, its lights casting long shadows over the ruins. Inside the chamber, the crystal sphere glowed like a captured piece of the sky. The guardian stood at its door, unmoving but full of quiet power. The humans were spread across the ruins, each at a position chosen earlier for cover and line of sight. Rin's scanner beeped sharply. Multiple signals were approaching fast. The strangers were no longer just a distant worry. They were minutes away. Hale's voice came over the comm, steady and clear. They would hold their ground. They would not let the sphere fall into the wrong hands. The first light appeared above the canyon, a burning streak that broke into 3 smaller trails. The strangers' crafts were descending. Mara tightened her grip on her weapon. Darrow checked his aim, and Lynn's eyes narrowed as she watched the sky. The crafts came down in perfect formation, landing on the open ground beyond the ruins. Dust rose in clouds, and from each craft stepped tall armored figures. Their spears hummed faintly, and their masks reflected the blue light of the sphere. This time, there were more of them than before. Not just 3, but 10. One figure stepped forward. It was taller than the others, with a cloak made of fine dark threads. Through the translator came its words. The sphere belonged to their people. The humans had no claim to it. If they left now, they would be spared. Hale's reply was calm. The sphere was not theirs to take, and humans would not abandon those who protected it. The leader tilted its head, then made a sharp motion with its hand. The strangers spread out, forming a half circle around the ruins. The hum of their weapons grew louder. The guardian stepped forward. Light poured from its body until the shadows vanished from the canyon floor. Its arms lifted, and a wide arc of shimmering energy formed between it and the ruins. The humans stood just inside the shield, the blue glow washing over them. The strangers struck first. Blades of energy shot toward the shield, hitting with a sound like deep thunder. The shield rippled, but held. The guardian did not move back. Hale gave the order, and the humans returned fire. Red bursts of light flashed from the ruins, striking the strangers' armor. Some staggered but held their ground. The battle grew louder. Dust filled the air, and the light of weapons lit the walls of the canyon. Rin called out that 2 of the strangers were trying to flank around the far side. Dara moved quickly, cutting them off with sharp, careful shots. Lynn spotted another pair attempting to climb the wall for a higher angle. She fired, forcing them back down. The guardian stepped forward again, and the shield moved with it. Its hands pressed outward, sending a wave of pure light toward the strangers. The blast threw several of them back, their spears clattering on the stone. But the strangers were not finished. More bursts of energy hit the shield, faster and harder. The glow began to dim. Mara could see the guardian's light flicker slightly. She shouted to Hale that the shield might not hold if they did not push the attackers back soon. Hale ordered a concentrated strike. All 4 humans focused their fire on the leader. The cloaked figure raised its spear to block, but the blasts forced it to step back. The moment its footing slipped, the guardian struck again. A narrow beam of light hit the spear, shattering it into pieces that fell like dark rain. The leader staggered but did not fall. It raised its arm, and the remaining strangers began to pull back toward their crafts. The battle slowed. The sound of weapons faded into the wind. The leader stood for a long moment, looking at the humans and the guardian. Then it spoke again. The sphere was safe for now, but the day would come when their people would return for it. With that, It turned and boarded its craft. The others followed. The ships lifted into the sky, their dark forms vanishing into the night. The ruins grew quiet again. The only sound was the slow hum of the Guardian's light. It lowered its arms, and the shield faded away. The glow around its body returned to its calm, steady brightness. Mara, Rin, Darrow, and Lin stepped out from their cover. Their faces were tired but filled with relief. Halle walked to the Guardian and spoke clearly. The humans would not take the sphere. They would leave it under the Guardian's watch and tell no one of its exact location. The Guardian raised one hand, and a final vision filled their minds. They saw humans returning to the canyon many years in the future, not as takers, but as allies. They saw the map used to find new worlds, with both humans and other races sharing them in peace. The vision faded, and the Guardian turned back to the chamber. It stepped inside and stood once again beside the glowing sphere, still and patient as it had been for centuries. Halle ordered the crew to prepare for departure. They would return to the horizon and leave the moon before the strangers could change their mind. As the ship rose above the canyon, Mara looked down one last time. The ruins lay quiet in the pale light, the Guardian's glow a single bright point in the darkness. She felt a strange pride in knowing they had done what was right, even if no one else would ever know the full story. The horizon turned toward the black of space, leaving the moon behind. But in the minds of the crew, the image of the sphere and the being who guarded it would remain, a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures were not the ones taken, but the ones protected.